"Can I help tend the cattle for a meal?" the old man asked, his voice cracking with desperation. Jake burst out laughing, pointing at Samuel's torn clothes and shaky hands. "Look at this fool. Thinks he can handle cattle." Tommy joined in the mockery. "Grandpa, you can barely stand up straight." But when that wild bull broke free moments later, tossing strong cowboys to the ground, everything changed. The same broken man they'd ridiculed walked straight toward that raging beast and tamed it with one gentle touch. The laughter died. The crowd gasped. "Sweet Lord," old Bill whispered. "That's Samuel the Storm, the greatest cowboy who ever lived." The man they'd mocked was a living legend. The sun was beating down merciless on the dusty ranch gate when old Samuel walked up, his boots worn thin as paper and his clothes hanging off him like scarecrow rags. Lord, the man looked like he hadn't seen a proper meal in weeks, maybe months. "Excuse me," Samuel called out to the 3 young cowboys mending fence nearby, his voice cracking like autumn leaves. "I was wondering, could I maybe help tend your cattle? Just for a meal, that's all I'm asking." The youngest one, Jake, looked up first and burst out laughing so hard he nearly dropped his hammer. "You hear that, boys? This old-timer thinks he can handle cattle. Look at him," Tommy snorted, pointing at Samuel's shaky hands. "Man can barely stand up straight and he wants to wrangle steers." The third one, Bobby, shook his head with pure mockery. "Grandpa, you'd be better off begging at the church service on Sunday. Cattle work ain't for folks who can't even mend their own clothes." Samuel stood there, dignity crumbling like dry dirt, but his eyes, oh honey, his eyes held something these young men couldn't see. Something that whispered of thundering hooves and rodeo crowds cheering his name. But none of them knew that this very man had once carved his name into the history of the prairie. As Jake's cruel laughter echoed across the dusty yard, something stirred deep in Samuel's weathered mind. Lord, how the memories came rushing back like a flood breaking through a dam. 25 years ago, this same ground had trembled under the hooves of wild broncos as Samuel rode them to victory one after another. The crowd would rise to their feet, cheering Samuel the Storm as he conquered every beast that dared challenge him. "I remember when you could stay on any horse for miles around," he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the young men's mockery. Back then, county fairs from Texas to Montana knew his name. Trophy buckles lined his mantelpiece, and newspaper clippings called him the Pride of Cedar Valley. Women would blush when he tipped his hat, and men would buy him drinks just to hear his stories. Now look at him, begging for scraps like a stray dog, his once strong hands shaking from hunger and years of hard living. The same folks who used to cheer his name wouldn't even recognize the broken man standing at their gate. Tommy kept laughing, pointing at Samuel's torn shirt. This old fool probably never even sat on a horse. If he had once been the king of the rodeo, why was he now begging for dignity before them all? As Samuel's memories kept flowing, the darkest one of all came crashing back like a punch to the gut. His older brother Marcus, oh Lord, how that name still made his heart ache with betrayal. "Samuel's been taking cattle that ain't his," Marcus had whispered to anyone who'd listen, poison dripping from every word. "Seen him with my own eyes, moving steers at night when he thought nobody was watching." The lie spread through Cedar Valley faster than wildfire in August. Folks who used to tip their hats started crossing the street when they saw Samuel coming. The general store owner wouldn't sell him supplies no more, and the bank, well, they froze every penny he had. "You're a thief," the sheriff told him that awful Tuesday morning, his voice cold as winter stone. "Your own brother says so, and Marcus ain't never lied to nobody in this town." Samuel had begged, pleaded, shown proof of his honest work. But who was going to believe him over Marcus? His brother was the respected one, the church deacon who never missed a service, who always helped his neighbors. Within 6 months, Samuel lost everything, his ranch, his reputation, his place in the only community he'd ever known. He packed what little he could carry and left Cedar Valley in the dead of night, broken and betrayed. But what looked like mere jealousy was hiding far deeper interests. 25 years of wandering had brought Samuel back to where it all began, Cedar Valley. But oh honey, how different everything looked through the eyes of a broken man seeking nothing but mercy. "All right, old-timer," Bobby finally said, shaking his head like he was doing Samuel the biggest favor in the world. "You can muck out the stables and haul feed sacks, but don't expect no charity if you can't keep up." Samuel nodded, his throat tight with gratitude that tasted bitter as medicine. "Thank you kindly, sir. I won't let you down." The work was back-breaking, hauling 100-pound sacks in the scorching heat, clearing manure that made his back scream with every shovel. His hands, once steady enough to rope a running calf, now trembled from exhaustion and hunger. Jake watched him struggle with a heavy wheelbarrow and snickered to Tommy. "Look at Grandpa there. Man's gonna collapse before supper time." Should have never hired him, Tommy muttered back. Dead weight, that's all he is. But old Bill, the foreman who'd been around these parts for 40 years, kept watching Samuel with curious eyes. Something about the way the old man moved, even weak as he was. It reminded him of somebody important. Samuel heard every cruel word, felt every dismissive look, but he kept working in silence, carrying pain deeper than any physical ache. Yet his silence carried a wisdom that would soon speak louder than words. On his third day, Samuel was sent to move cattle from the south pasture. The moment he stepped into that field, something magical happened, like coming home after years of wandering in the wilderness. Easy now, easy, Samuel whispered to a nervous heifer, his voice soft as a lullaby. He started humming an old tune, moving slow and steady, never rushing or forcing. The cattle, who'd been skittish all morning, began to calm down. Jake and Tommy watched from the fence, laughing at what they thought was foolishness. Look at him singing to cows like they're babies, Jake snorted. But something incredible was happening. Even Brutus, the meanest steer on the ranch who'd kicked 3 cowboys last month, walked right up to Samuel like an old friend. The old man's weathered hand touched the animal's flank, and that wild beast became gentle as a lamb. How in the Sam Hill? Tommy's laughter died in his throat. Old Bill's eyes went wide with recognition. Lord have mercy, he whispered to another ranch hand. I seen that style before. That's the way Samuel the Storm used to handle cattle back in the day. Other older cowboys started gathering, memories stirring like dust in the wind. They watched Samuel work with a grace that defied his broken appearance, moving through that herd like he was dancing with angels. And in that very moment, life placed before him the greatest challenge of all. Just then, thunder erupted from the main corral. Diablo, the wildest bull in 3 counties, had busted through his pen and was raging mad as a tornado. 2 cowboys hit the dirt hard, scrambling for the fence as that beast charged with fury in his eyes. Get back! Everybody get back! Bobby yelled, but Diablo was already chasing the 3rd cowboy, who barely made it over the rails in time. Jake and Tommy were hooting and hollering from their safe spot. Hey, old man, Jake called out mockingly. Why don't you go calm down your buddy there? The laughter died real quick when Samuel started walking toward that raging bull, slow and steady, his weathered hands empty of rope or weapon. Don't be a fool, Bill shouted. That animal will kill you. But Samuel kept walking, humming that same soft tune. When Diablo charged straight at him, snorting and pawing the ground, Samuel did something nobody expected. He stepped aside at the perfect moment and touched the bull's neck with an ancient technique, pressing just the right spot. Diablo stopped dead in his tracks, then slowly, impossibly, laid down like a trained dog. The entire ranch fell silent as death. Every mouth hung open, every eye fixed on the broken old man who'd just tamed the untamable. Even those who mocked him began to doubt the lies they had once believed. Old Bill couldn't hold back no more. Sweet Lord above, he whispered, his voice shaking with recognition. Boys, that there is Samuel Morrison, Samuel the Storm himself. Word spread faster than gossip at Sunday service. Within an hour, half of Cedar Valley had gathered at the ranch. Old-timers who'd been keeping quiet for 25 years finally found their voices. This man saved our cattle in the drought of '98, Martha Jenkins called out, her weathered hands clutching her shawl. When everyone else's herds were dying, Samuel led ours to hidden water sources nobody else knew about. Greatest cattleman we ever had in these parts, shouted Pete Williams from his pickup truck. My daddy told me stories about Samuel's riding for years. But then Marcus appeared, pushing through the crowd, his face pale as winter snow. Y'all are confused, he stammered, but his voice cracked like thin ice. He can't be. Look at him work, another voice yelled. Ain't nobody else can handle Diablo like that. That's Samuel Morrison's touch, sure as I'm breathing. The crowd grew louder, memories flooding back like spring rain after a long drought. Samuel stood silent, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as his community finally remembered who he really was. And the more memories surfaced, the clearer it became who had truly been unjust. Martha Jenkins reached into her old leather purse with shaking hands. I kept this all these years, she said, pulling out a yellowed letter from Charlie Henderson, the old foreman. He wrote it on his deathbed, confessing the truth. The crowd gathered close as she read aloud. Marcus Morrison and I made up them lies about Samuel stealing cattle. We wanted his land, his reputation gone so we could take over. Samuel never stole nothing from nobody. God forgive us both. A collective gasp rose from the crowd like steam from hot coffee. Marcus's face went white as a sheet, his hands trembling like autumn leaves. "That ain't true," Marcus shouted, but his voice cracked with guilt. Charlie was sick, confused. Old Pete Williams stepped forward, his jaw set firm. "I seen you and Charlie meeting in secret, planning how to divide up Samuel's ranch after he left town. You thought nobody was watching, but I was. I worked for Samuel for 15 years, another ranch hand called out. Never seen a more honest man in my life, but I was too scared to speak up against the preacher's brother. The weight of 25 years of lies came crashing down like a house of cards." Samuel stood silent, his heart breaking not just from his own suffering, but from seeing his brother's cruelty finally exposed. And now, with the falsehood exposed, one question remained: vengeance or forgiveness? Marcus looked around at the faces staring at him, 25 years of guilt finally catching up like a storm he couldn't outrun. His legs gave out, and he dropped to his knees right there in the dusty corral, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Samuel," Marcus choked out, his voice breaking like a dam busting open. "I destroyed you and took everything you had, everything you were. And here you are, saving our cattle, protecting what should have been yours all along." The crowd held its breath, waiting to see what Samuel would do. 25 years of wandering, hunger and shame. Any man had the right to demand justice. Samuel walked slowly to where his brother knelt, his own eyes filling with tears that had been held back for decades. "Marcus," he whispered, his voice gentle as morning rain, Can you ever forgive me?" Marcus sobbed, his whole body shaking with the weight of his sins. Samuel reached down and helped his brother to his feet, pulling him into an embrace that made grown cowboys wipe their eyes. "I forgive you, brother. I forgive you." Martha Jenkins started crying, then Pete Williams, then the whole crowd. Even Jake, Tommy, and Bobby stood there with tears rolling down their young faces, witnessing something they'd never seen before. But the forgiveness was not only between brothers, it became an example for generations to come. 6 months later, Samuel stood in his own training corral watching Jake, Tommy, and Bobby practice the gentle techniques he'd been teaching them. The same young men who'd mocked him at the fence now hung on his every word like gospel. "Remember," Samuel said softly, "cattle can sense your heart. Approach with anger and they'll fight back. Come with respect and they'll follow you anywhere." Word of Samuel's forgiveness and wisdom had spread across 3 counties. Young cowboys came from hundreds of miles away to learn from the legend himself. Samuel's Ranch Hand Academy became the most respected training ground in the territory. Marcus worked alongside his brother now, his guilt transformed into dedication. Every day he helped teach the lessons that their story had birthed, that pride leads to destruction, but humility leads to restoration. At county fairs and church gatherings, folks would sing the ballad of Samuel the Storm, the tale of a broken man who chose love over revenge. Children grew up knowing that real strength ain't about never falling down, but about how you get back up. Old Martha Jenkins, now 92, still told the story to anyone who'd listen. "That man taught us all what forgiveness really looks like," she'd say, her eyes bright with memory. And so the old man who asked for food in exchange for work left behind the greatest treasure, the lesson that honor and dignity never die. Now you might be sitting there thinking this is just another story, but let me tell you something. Samuel's journey ain't so different from what many of us face every single day. How many times have we been written off, dismissed, or judged by people who don't know our story? How many of us are carrying wounds from betrayals that cut deeper than any physical pain? Samuel's story teaches us that our worst moments don't define us. It's what we choose to do with them that matters. That old cowboy could have spent his life bitter and angry, seeking revenge on everyone who wronged him. Instead, he chose something far more powerful: forgiveness and the courage to keep moving forward, even when the world had given up on him. What dreams have you buried because someone told you that you weren't good enough? What talents are you hiding because past failures made you doubt yourself? Are you letting other people's opinions write the final chapter of your story? Is there someone in your life who hurt you so deeply that you're still carrying that pain around like a heavy stone in your chest? What would happen if you chose forgiveness, not for their sake, but for your own freedom? Samuel Morrison proved that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, to show the world who you really are, and to transform your pain into purpose. Age, circumstances, past mistakes, none of that matters when you decide to stand up and show your true character. Don't let anyone convince you that your best days are behind you. Sometimes the greatest victories come after the most devastating defeats. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the words, "I thought my life was over, but then Your story ain't finished yet. What's your next chapter gonna say? If this story moved your heart and reminded you that comeback is always possible, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're building a community of people who believe in second chances and the power of never giving up. And hey, click on that video appearing on your screen right now to hear another incredible story of triumph over tragedy. Trust me, you're gonna want to stick around for what's coming next.